Welcome to the AI-assisted organisation podcast of Implement AI with myself, your host Piers and my co-host and co-founder Aalok Shukla. Good evening, Aalok.
Good evening, Piers. How are you?
All right, we kind of lost the light this evening. We're doing this quite late. I was on TV this morning. I didn't get to weave in artificial intelligence, but we were talking about remote working and the news from Zoom about the wanting people to come back to the office, which is quite interesting. So I don't know what else you've been doing this week. I've been sort of pretty quiet. I've been working, to be honest with you. But I've been seeing you've been grappling. You've been doing chess lessons. And what was the other one? It was, you've now bought a Starlink, just showing off.
No, it's been a busy week. Yeah, when I was a kid, right, there was like literally three things I was kind of obsessed with, and I used to do a lot. I love technology. I used to like solder different electronics and make lots of different stuff, and I'd just be in my room basically with fumes and just soldering and playing with like technology when I was like from like 9 until 13. So obviously like with Implement AI, I just love doing all that stuff. But then I used to play chess a lot. I was like I won't say about it, but like I used to play for like different teams in the counties and went to a few international tournaments and stuff when I was younger. So I stopped really for 27 years, really, like since I was 16. And so I've just started again. I've started lessons with the guy who's the 5 times Portugal champion. So his rating is his rating is insane compared to mine. And then I've started last few weeks jiu-jitsu lessons with a guy who's like, he's really good. And he just comes twice a week to basically kill me and laugh at me. Right, just that's basically it. But yeah,
I'm still thinking about jiu-jitsu. But I was bored too for East Lancashire, but I wasn't very good. I think I blagged it. I won the right games at the right time, I think. Anyways, let's get into it. So another sort of, we'll say it's a hectic week, but it always seems to be. But we've got some quite interesting stuff to show you as well. So if you're listening to this, you might want to flip over to YouTube at the right moment as well. So we're going to touch on the AI arms race, just going through what we're going to cover today. Some of the more partnerships, the big players, you see more and more of these where they're kind of putting together their respective powers, from software to hardware and so on. The importance of training your large language model and what happens when you release these things into the wild without the proper training. You can get into a mess very, very quickly. Talk about what we're up to, Implement AI, got some news. I'm also going to give you a demo. We're now creating agents. So we call this a micro SaaS or agents. It's the agent mindset. That's how these things are going to change. So we're going to show you how you get into that, what that actually means. Some news on Google, and of course at the end, AI of the week. So that's going to show you how now in business you can avoid the creative barrier, that point where you stop and think, oh no, I need to go and get a design now. Those days are over as well. So let's start off. So OpenAI is deploying. This is really interesting. So OpenAI itself, this is a ChatGPT company that built it and deployed it. They're now building their own bot. So this is the web crawling bot called GPT-bot, I think they're calling it. And this is to expand its capabilities and to enhance model accuracy. So this is what Google does. It has these sort of bots, these spiders that crawl the web and sort of structures it, lets it know what's out there and brings it back for the search engine to understand and find things quickly. Now, what's interesting is that OpenAI have a partnership with Microsoft and they're integrated into Bing. So it's fascinating seeing that everyone seems to be going everything in all directions, despite the partnerships they've already got.
No, for sure. And if you think about how this is going to shift things, then web search is changing fundamentally. And like on a normal website, you've got the robots.txt, which basically tells the web crawler that Google what to read or what not to read and ignore. And the same thing with GPTBot. Like OpenAI is going to be saying that you can tell it to disallow or not to read things, but you actually do want it to read things. But the problem is, it's going to be like when it comes to some media properties where people want people to actually go to that website. That's going to be a bit of a funny relationship because you kind of don't necessarily want all of that information ingested and fed back into the system. So it's going to be interesting times, and I think like how websites will evolve, even those which have like paid content walls and things like this, I think it's going to be very interesting how it's going to evolve.
Yeah, and also if you do have that little bit of text in your website in the header somewhere, then no one's ever going to find you. So that's going to be an interesting outcome for a lot of people if they choose that option. So another piece of news is really getting back to generative AI, the big players is Google. So Google it's kind of slowly rolling out generative AI. There's Google Gemini, Google DeepMind. They're all, seeing lots of things come from different parts of the business. But something they kind of have now rolled out, and it's quite frustrating that you can't always get hold of these things in Google Labs. Maybe you should try if you can. You can't do it through a sort of a business account. You've got to have a personal one, and it's a Google Generative AI Search. So I've seen some demos on this and tried to play with it as well through someone else's browser, and it still seems to me to be kind of reverting to, or very much seems to be standard Google search. Now, whether that's because they're worried about cannibalizing their search business and they don't want to sort of too quickly go from 0 to 100 miles an hour on generative search, but I don't really see, I wasn't really getting or seeing the person using it getting answers. They were just getting search options, which I don't really see the point of.
Yeah, I've requested access as well, but I think the point you made is completely valid. It's their core business function, right? So you don't want to like destroy that too quickly. So, but yeah, let's see how these different tools evolve, and let's see what the accuracy of search comes back to, because many people are just not happy with 10 blue links anymore, basically.
I was moving on. So some kind of macro news, and I kind of come back to this quite a lot. It's the arms race, AI arms race, especially in the sort of GPUs and chips and sort of innovation and intellectual property generally. And this is not because it's particularly relevant to implementing AI into businesses, but it kind of gives you an idea of how serious nation states are taking this, and for very good reason. Saying lots of the events that we do that if one nation state gets ahead and say it's solved AGI, artificial general intelligence, on, I don't know, Monday, and the other nation solves it on, I don't know, Wednesday or Friday or by the weekend, the latter will never catch up, assuming that the exponential curves are sort of quite similar looking. You'll never catch up, and the gap between you over time becomes material as well. So you're now seeing the US has now banned future investments in, this is particularly targeted at China. So Chinese AI, semiconductors, quantum computing, and it's been an executive order by the president there, Joe Biden. So you're seeing that legislation kicking in now to try and slow down the competition using lots of the technology that nation states have have their sort of arms or their hands around. And in the US, for example, that will be NVIDIA.
For sure. I mean, I watched Oppenheimer last weekend, and like it's kind of the same thing, really, isn't it? Right? Like, basically, whoever develops those capabilities first and has the ability to deploy them in various different ways, it's just going to be very, very challenging for other people. And so, I'm not surprised in the slightest, and it's just going to get more and more intense.
But what this does, as I say, it just shows how serious this is. This is game-changing stuff. You wouldn't see this legislation being enacted this quickly. You're seeing the same in the UK. They'll see similar things. Nobody wants the competition to get there first, because just like from Oppenheimer, which I also took my daughter to, actually, I couldn't believe she got through it. It is exactly the same. It's a new Manhattan Project in many ways. So moving on then. So a really interesting article was by Andrew, is it Ingo? How you pronounce his name? And he's kind of a VC and a sort of a technologist as well. And he was sort of commenting, then writing, that he believes that large language models understand the world around them. Now, this can be quite hard as a human to kind of understand what he's talking about, but you've got to think of yourselves in a way that essentially, we have wetware in our head, and we understand the world. We build a model of the world, and the model of our world depends very much on our experience, our inputs, our parents, the environment in which we grow up. But that's what kind of creates it, prompts us essentially. It's our custom instruction backend, which I'll also touch on later. And he's saying that these models understand the world. Now, other people are saying that they don't and they can't reason, but increasingly we're seeing these sort of sparks of AGI. But in basic level, he believes they do. So I don't know what you think about that.
I think that if you think about a spider's web, right? You've got all the different connections, and you can see how everything links together. Okay. Now, if you think about language, code, and communication, all of that is a pattern, a web, if you want to call it, and everything is linked to each other. Now, at a certain point, when a machine has the ability to literally replicate all the nuances of reality through language, through code, through patterns, and because it matches everything that humans have put out there. And so any other human that looks at it, they would think, oh yes, this does match. If what is this? And it explains it in that way, and it matches your reasoning. At some point, you're going to think, well, you'll pass the Turing test, because you'll be like, yes, this makes complete sense. Now, the meta question is, does the machine actually understand it? It actually doesn't really matter, because if it knows the map exactly, of all the language, of all the patterns, of all the things which are linked to each other, it essentially is the same thing. And now we're getting into semantics. But I 100% definitely believe that AI understands the model of the world. It understands causality. It understands all the different dimensions, and that's the whole point of why it understands context so well. So I think the key thing is it can understand areas better than we can, and it can have more relationships and interrelationships, which is the whole point where we use them for advanced databases. So I think at the point that we're looking at now is AI has a very detailed map of the world, which is more accurate than the map in our own heads. And so I would say, yes, it does understand the world. It might not have consciousness, but it understands all the implications and the links.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it doesn't really matter how this technology understands the world around it. It may be in a completely different way to us, but as long as it does, it doesn't matter at all. I think he may mention his paper, that sort of famous thought experiment about the kind of person locked in a box, and he's got to translate, instructions from Chinese to English. So you think this box understands, translate? It doesn't. There's a mechanism of making that happen inside. So I totally agree with you. I think that the more you look at things and play with these things, that there is a basic understanding of the world in which they're operating.
It's like Google. It's like Waze. Okay, Waze understands the terrain, right? Like, and it can redirect you based on what's happening. And you can ask it, does it understand what a road is? It doesn't really matter because it can direct you. It understands when people are slowing down. It understands when a new place opens up. It understands where to go to. So I think we're getting to the point where AI, as a kind of co-pilot, as a guide, as a companion, it's already exceeded our capabilities. So the question is just like for us to link with it, have our wetware with its capabilities, really.
And not only that, the power is it can multitask, which we struggle to do. So
Yeah.
it might not be as powerful as us quite yet, but you look at these sort of military systems where they're targeting 100 moving targets at once, where as a human pilot can only fix his gaze on one. So that's the power of this stuff, is the scalability of it. So that'd be quite interesting to follow. So another one, I know if you're listening to this, you may or may not have heard of Hugging Face. It's not a new cool clothing brand. It's actually it's probably worth a couple of billion now, and basically it's you can go on the web, have a look at it, and there's lots about 250,000 different models there. You can go there and it's all open source. So you can look at different AI models, machine learning models, and play with them, test them. Now they've done a deal with NVIDIA. Everyone's doing deals with NVIDIA. So you can now essentially choose a model, train it, and then deploy it on supercomputer infrastructure provided by NVIDIA to then test it, which is actually really important. Otherwise, if you're not testing on the right infrastructure, you're not really seeing its true performance, and the real infrastructure is really expensive. And the last point to add is that I think they've also done a deal with Microsoft as well, who are offering, I think through Azure as well, another sort of training service as well. So it's amazing how everyone's just partnering everybody else. Compute models, open source infrastructure, just so people can move faster.
No, I mean it's like different kinds of electricity, right? Solar, wind, gas. Like what nuclear. It's just like we've got the cable, we'll supply it to you. Where do you what type do you want? And I think the beauty these days with like all these different types of models is you've got the complete ability to have your own model or use like a different one, and you can customize it whatever way you want. So I think the accessibility and the power of these tools and the variety, and we're going to see some very interesting things developed over the next 6 to 12 months, I would say. And I'm really excited to see like how that full level of creativity kind of comes out. I heard about like there was a quote from Paul Graham, who is like head of Y Combinator, and he was saying that his latest batch of Y Combinator, basically it's all full of people who are experts in industry that have discovered that knew about problems that weren't solved, but now with AI see a way to solve it. So the democratization of all these tools and smart people looking at things, it's going to be some fantastic stuff coming.
And that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Is that entrepreneurs, starting a business, essentially, it is finding a problem, hopefully one that nobody else has really spotted, or maybe they have spotted but haven't worked out a way to solve it. You're now seeing new ways of solving it. So, we've discussed it at a sort of length, this sort of thin layer of SaaS companies across LLMs. I'm not too sure they're going to be long for this world, but somebody spotted a real problem that artificial intelligence allows them to solve in new, innovative ways, and they can charge for. Means we are going to see a really exciting new wave of innovation.
No, 100%. It's just like specific tools, specific scenarios, and just doing it perfectly every single time. So that's the way we're going to go.
And talking about innovation, moving on, something you read about a lot in the press is deep fakes, right? And I was watching something where you were looking at these things, a couple of years ago, and you could kind of see that it wasn't quite right. It was pretty good, quite impressive, but now you just can't tell. And especially when it comes to speech. So video is clearly far more complicated. But now, getting the old phone call, I think somebody stole $35 million from a bank because they cloned the boss's voice and called up somebody and asked them to make a quick transfer. So the days of getting a call from your parents or your loved one telling you to do something or send some money or do something you probably wouldn't normally do, they're here. So I think this research was by University College in London. It was saying that humans can only identify deepfake speech with 73% accuracy. That's today. So where's that going to go? And that's regardless of the language used. So they're saying that this technology is moving very, very quickly, and people are trying to. There's also an arms race for detectors. So whether it's AI, text detectors or speech or video, then you have another AI trying to defeat the detectors. So there's an arms race there that I think is going to become, and this pervades everything: business, cybersecurity, politics, everything. Deep fake. And this is, again, I've said this before. This is maybe where your NFT, that digital sort of absolute proof of the provenance of a piece of content, may actually have its finally have a use case.
No, and I think like one thing I heard about was like some families were thinking about having a safe word, which I think is not a bad idea, right? It's a bit like when you phone up your bank, they ask for a certain code or something like this. So if you ever get asked about something, having a kind of family safe word, which is the reference. So if someone was cloning your voice, you'd kind of detect that would be like this. But I mean, the text detectors for AI have already been given up, right? So I do. We talk about before that how Stable Diffusion does have like a kind of special kind of water tag within any AI generated content. But yeah, it's going to be important more and more to have like more live, more in person, more authentic, and more traceable communication. Definitely, and we talked about that in the past, like how more and more people are going to want in person experiences, and at the same time, it's just gonna evolve.
And that's quite interesting, isn't it? So if you're in business and you're selling, and you've got clients or customers, you know, they are going to want to know. So people don't care how things are solved, whether it's an individual or it's an AI or some chatbot, as long as the issue gets solved. But like you're saying, we may see that events, face-to-face events, kind of come back, or they see a renaissance.
For sure.
Right, so let's get on to Implement AI. I mean, flipping out, this could be we could do half an hour on what we're up to. So we've put out there. If you haven't seen it yet, sign up for our white paper. It's AI assisted organization. It's a blueprint for business. It's focused on both SMEs and enterprise. So our whole framework is in that document. So it's definitely worth going to have a read of and download. We've had really good feedback on that. And what that really brings to is this concept of agents. So, I mean, Aalok says, and I quite like it, is that you've got your kind of payroll, people sitting on your payroll, and you're going to build up over time kind of a list of agents to take on lots of these tasks. And eventually some will overlap, some will be replaced, but you'll see a sort of a friction between the two over time. But it's what we call the agent mindset. So you can design agents, is what we do as well. Design agents, design what's micro SaaS or specialist SaaS for your business to automate your workflows. And we've been doing that, and we thought we'd show you a quick demo of one example.
Yep, 100%. So in the AI assisted organization blueprint, the white paper, we talk about the 5 levels of AI, going from like similar to self-driving car, from like zero with no AI to full AI, full automation. And each step of the way, you have different tasks which are carried out by AI or assisting the human with AI. And what we're talking about here is like having the AI agents, which will start helping you across marketing, sales, delivery, fulfillment, and operations. And those AI agents can do different tasks. And up until now, some people have been asking me, like, what examples of tasks can you have? Let's have a look, and let's look at some examples, because we're now building different AI agents which fulfill different tasks within businesses. And what's so nice about these AI agents is they can do literally anything. So let's have a look at an example. So I'm just going to.
So this is where we should say, if you're listening to this is not going to be as interesting, but listen on, and also going over to YouTube where we post this usually about a day later.
So this is an example of an invoice. So within many businesses, we've got data entry, and data entry could take many different forms: receiving a PDF, receiving a letter, having some information within it. It might be an invoice, it might be a request, it might be a document from a company with some details of a policy or a product or anything like this. But the point is, you need a human or someone to extract the useful information of it and then fill that into some kind of software. And it could be accounting software, a CRM software, or anything else like this, so that actions and work can take place. Up until now, the solution with these sorts of things would be to use a different tool, then load it into it, and then send it to a different place. But let's have a little look at an example of how we could use that. So here, so this is a data entry agent. So this can be customized to accept any type of file. At the moment, we've just made it for PDFs. And let's look at an example. So if we browse a file and we attach an invoice, we can see that it's running and analyzing it. And then here it's showing what is actually here. So in this invoice, it's showing it's for 9350, what the item is, and the company name and the invoice date. So if this invoice had all those different details in it, what we can then do is, if we go back here, see where it says sync. This is where it will then pass it into the accounting software Xero, for example, or any other cyber software. And if the company is an existing place that we order from, it will then add it to their details. If it's a new company that we've not dealt with before, it will then create a whole new record for it. But the beauty of this is this AI data entry agent could be responsible for accounting, or it could also be responsible for sales update. So imagine, for example, it got some information back in and then it needs to update Salesforce or Pipedrive or something else like this. It can do that job. And these agents can just keep working and doing things, and it keeps a record of everything it's done. So the key thing to think about is, like just like Piers said, is you've got your team which are on your payroll and doing your job for you. But then over time, what you want to do is pair each of those team members with an AI agent that can then help take more and more of the repetitive tasks. So then the human can become more creative and free, and the AI agents can do more processing each minute. So having this agent mindset and thinking about how you enter those into your business, it's going to be a very exciting time.
I think you've undersmoked that in terms of what actually happened there. So essentially, the first thing is that it's not just basic OCR. There's kind of element of optical character recognition in the OCR. But essentially, also, it can be quite hard to read PDFs. It can be hard to read images. What this is doing is translating that into a format that a large language model can understand. That's the first step. Then, once you can understand the text, a large language model can very accurately, you can basically, behind the scenes, there were some prompts, and it's saying, look for this information, find this information, maybe add these two things together, whatever it might be. So no matter what the document is, an invoice is a very basic example, the prompts in the back end are then taking that document, that text, and the prompt, then using a large language model to extract the data you want to extract from that document. You could have an extremely large, complicated, verbose document, but you only want a couple of things out of it, important things, and that can go off there and find them. So there's quite a bit more going on there than it might seem at first glance. But the beauty of these things, these agencies, you can literally sit down with us and sort of map out, what do I need this to do? How do I add some value? And you can almost make them do almost anything. It's fascinating.
100%. Like we've had examples where people have asked for complex documents that come in from some suppliers to be analyzed and then summarized within different areas, and these agents can then just be tuned to do that in that workflow, basically. So 100%.
And they can extract that data, and then you can train it to use it to write a new document in your house style, and produce something new. So there's quite a bit. I mean, these things are, the power is in the underlying models. This is sort of a thin layers across the top, but it's actually understanding what workflow it is, what you're trying to achieve, and making it do it in as few steps as possible. So that's the agent mindset. That's this concept of micro SaaS, or these apps where you build them for your business. I mean, you can go online and buy software as a service that does that. We've compared it to a few, which is quite expensive. These large language models and the APIs, they're not that expensive to actually use them, even at scale. So one of the things that also, again, that a lot of people don't really realize is that your data structure, and I'll get back to why this is linked, is actually really important. So if you take that data in that document and it's sitting in a sort of a pretty standard sort of SQL database, it's not that great for large language model. It needs something which is vectorized. It's got to have semantic search, so it can actually ask those questions and it can go and find the data and extract it. So your AI experience, your ability to become AI assisted in many ways, is partly going to be down to the structure of your company data.
Yeah. And I think the key thing that the insight I had this week really was when we would work on a project and I was looking at some things and I was talking with some of the tech team, is there's really kind of like three things that you need to have in place to do the really interesting stuff and to really unleash the full power of AI. One, you need to have your data all captured. So every phone call, every meeting, all the different details, all that kind of stuff has to be captured because there's so much useful information about customers which doesn't sit in a neat box in Salesforce or Pipedrive or anywhere like this, but that's useful. And if that was actually stored and accessible within a way, that could be leveraged in the future. And the second layer above that, which was I thought was really interesting, is when I was talking with the tech team, they were saying, yes, but you need to make sure you have the policies and everything for that 100%. That's where it's having the chief AI officer, the fractional AI officer approach. And if you have your policies and structures set up so that technology is assisting all of your team and you have everything structured in the right way so it can work properly, then your team have the ability to do those things and be AI assisted in everything that they want to do. And then the third thing is like having systems and LLMs tuned for your workflows so you can actually then interrogate and say, okay, imagine, for example, there was a phone call about a particular customer, there were some meetings internally about that customer and different things like this. And if you had everything structured, anyone could just call up a thing and say, tell me the latest summary about this customer. And then it would then show you, from the phone call, from maybe some PDF information that they'd shipped in by email, and then also potentially from internal meeting, a summary of the latest things. And how much better could you look after that customer with that information at your fingertips without having to say, hey, let me ask Mike, let me ask Peter, let me ask Paul, basically, So having that kind of nuanced, granular detail accessible to everybody because the AI agent works for everybody is going to make the differentiator between excellent customer service and fast responses and mediocre human-led, basically. So having the right structure in place is critical.
Yeah, and we've kind of all heard this before in the days of big data. Capture all the data because one day you'll be able to use it. This is not that, right? This is the world's moved on. This is not capture a load of data that's sort of unstructured and then spend £1 million writing some algorithm to understand what the hell's in there. Number one, Alex absolutely right. Is number one, you have to capture everything, and that is written, that is voice, that's even video, the lot essentially. And then you have to make sure it's stored in the right format. And that is more of a vectorized style. I can go into the details how you get into LLM, because only then really can you use sort of semantic search and you can really extract the most value from it. But once it's structured like that, you can literally throw the power of these large language models at it. And the response you can get, the data back, the analysis is profound.
100%.
Right. So let's keep going with us. So our event on the 18th of October in Manchester is locked in. We're just finalising a few little bits and bobs as to what we're doing in the format of it. So look out on our social media for that. And we're also planning on the 19th of October, also in Manchester, an enterprise event. So more of a sort of a roundtable for larger companies, a bit like our sort of AI boardroom briefing in a way, with a bit more detail Aalok and I are going to be doing. So look out for that as well. We're also on the back of the event in Manchester, I think we're looking at maybe launching an Implement AI competition. So this is to kind of win one of our AI consultations. And these get fantastic feedback. Our events do, and also our boardroom briefings, and also the work that we do after that. A lot of clients pay us to do this, and it's really valuable, I think. So we're just again finalising the details of that, and we're probably going to be working with one of our close media partners on getting that out there. So keep your eyes open for that. And the last bit of news, Aalok touched upon it. We're going to be releasing our fractional chief AI officer white paper probably this week. Just a few tweaks there in the editing, and that's really about the case for having a fractional chief AI officer. I like to say chow, but Aalok doesn't like that. So because it's actually really important to have that expertise in your business. So look out for that.
No, 100%, and looking forward to the events. Also in September, I'm going to be doing an event on the 13th of September. I think there's a few spaces that might be there for a members club. And so, yeah, it'd be great to meet some different businesses along the way. But yeah, our fractional chief AI officer paper is going to be coming out. And just like we talked about before, you need to be able to like engineer, the culture level and then the human level and the team level and have the vision for where you want to go. And the devil of this stuff and the opportunities are in the details. So you need to make sure that you've got like the right technology operator and mindset pairing with your different chief, like strategic officers and different elements that you want to kind of go to. But you'll be able to read that in more detail within the white
this is
paper.
not some. I always say, don't I? This is not some discrete. Should we transition to the cloud project? This is a different ballgame. This needs to pervade your business, not all at once. We say there's a continuum of being AI assisted, but like the autonomous vehicles. So you have to move along at a pace that works for your organization, but you definitely need to be moving along it. So let's get back to some AI updates. So one thing that's really frustrating me, I don't know about you, is the fact we still can't access ChatGPT's custom instructions. This is having prompts in the back end. You don't have to start from scratch every time. And what's even more frustrating is that the free users in the US have got access to it, but the paid users in the UK and EU haven't. Now, not much we can do about that. I'm not going to bleat on about it. But when that does become available, though, I think we'll do a longer session on the podcast about that and what it means and how you can use it, because that is a really big development.
100%, and that's going to link into our training sections and everything like that as well. So.
And then another piece of news I found really interesting this week was the the New Zealand supermarket, and they released some meal planning app, and it came out with some recipes that included a chlorine gas. My favorite was the Oreo vegetable stir fry. And this really is it's kind of a demonstration of that you have to fine tune these models. You can't just throw something out there into production that your customers are going to interact with without really thinking about it. Perhaps doing a small test user group before you release it into the wild. And they kind of released it into the wild and have been bitten quite hard. I mean, it's probably PR's probably helped them. But you don't really want to be having an Oreo vegetable stir fry with a smattering of chlorine gas over it. So they have now sort of, rather than fix it, put a lot of caveats all over it, which I don't think it really works either. So again, don't just go to market with these things without thinking about it, because they are super powerful. They are very realistic in terms of where they interact with people, and it might be something that wasn't chlorine gas or something as weird as an Oreo vegetable stir fry. It could be something in a healthcare, whatever you do, a professional services firm, where the advice essentially, or the guidance, let's call it, is giving isn't quite right, but it wasn't quite as noticeable. That's something you need to be very careful of.
No, 100%. Like I think the key things there is like to put the framework and the bounds of like where it needs to focus and what it needs to do. Because I've seen the opposite, where there was like an amazing recipe recommendation tool where they basically were looking at like the nutritional needs of a person, and then they were then asking it based on seasonal fruits or vegetables to generate recipes which would optimize for those nutritional needs of that person. And it came up with some creative recipes which I hadn't actually heard of or seen before. So if you do it right, it's amazing. If you don't actually know what you're doing, yeah, maybe don't.
And sometimes the way these models respond, it's so believable, and it's so written in such a confident way that you think, okay, I had one the other day. I can send it to you, didn't I? Where it made a comment about something, and it said, this content is as good as anything in the market. Well, how do you know that? And then suddenly this was Claude 2, and it came back and said, oh, yeah, I'm really sorry about that. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Literally, it said that to me. So when it's sort of nuanced, it can be quite dangerous in terms of your customer relationships. And the other bit of news, which I think was really interesting, is that Google are now launching a browser-based coding tool. So I keep saying that the days of code being between an individual, a business, and an outcome, I think, are coming to an end. You will be able to talk to technology in natural language, and it'll deliver that outcome for you in terms of the code necessary for it to work. So you're now seeing Google got a browser-based tool, ChatGPT code interpreter. You've got Amazon Bedrock. You've got Google. Then the Google one basically is going to have code generation. It's going to have the ability to translate between different languages, which is really quite interesting, and then code checking and auto completion. So you're going to be moving up that value pyramid, as I always say, to the top to be the architect, but increasingly that's about all you'll be doing. Now, AI of the week, the last thing. Again, I look through so many of these things, and I always say that I keep getting told off for all these kind of subscriptions that keep appearing in my bank account, and the big ones are the good ones at the end of the day. The ones that have invested the money, they've been tested, they've had a lot of users playing with them, and that feedback's been built into the models. They're the most powerful. And I think one of the most interesting observations, we were talking about it this week, is often when you're an individual, you're in business, and you want to create something, you hit a step sometimes where you need design. And if you can't draw, like me, I did technical drawing at school back in the day. That's how old I am. But if you can't draw, or your ability to be creative is limited, you then have to wait for a designer, pay for a designer, and it can be quite frustrating. Now, the beauty of AI is that that's going away. You can now, and I think we might show this. Can we show this, Aalok, actually? Is that in this is Stability AI, they've got a website called ClipDrop, and you basically use all the different tools in there. And one of them is the ability to create sort of a doodle. So I did one the other day. I was showing my daughter where I drew a very simple pencil drawing, and I mean really simple, of a couple of sort of hills, a little church on top, a little house. And I said, I want this to be a Lancastrian Milltown moorland setting. And then it takes that doodle and basically uses the prompt and puts the two together and creates exactly what I was envisioning in my head. Now, it might not be perfect, but the beauty of it gets you 50, 60, 70% of the way down the road, so you can move on to the next stage in that process without having the time or the expense or the patience for designer, which might need to iterate it. So when you go to designer now, you've got perhaps much more of a clearer idea of what it is you're trying to communicate. So it might save you time and money. But I don't know,
Yeah,
Alok,
I'm sharing it right now.
can we
Yeah,
show
what
that?
did you want to show? Should we do a house, right? So you said a Lancastrian house, right?
Yeah, just do like
Okay, so I'm drawing a house.
well, yeah, I did like yeah. So your drawing's better than mine. So
I wouldn't really say that,
well, yeah, do a house like with a basic like kid's house and maybe a little picket fence around it, some flowers, and say draw a beautiful country cottage with a rose garden or something, and see what it comes up with.
So this is my.
Yeah, I think we both got the same level of art capability for sure.
This is my fence.
Although my picket fence would be better than that. Again, if you're listening to this is going to sound rubbish. You need to go onto YouTube. I'm getting feedback, Alok, on you. Yeah, so Lancastrian had a white picket fence and a beautiful rose garden or something. I mean, your doodle was a bit very basic. Looks like the house on fire. So again, okay, I wouldn't call it Lancastrian, but you can see what is picked up is the triangles, and it's got the white picket fence. Anyway, you can see that if you can draw a little bit better than us, and you spend some time on the prompt, you can keep iterating this, by the way, you can get a long way down that artistic, creative road, which I think is super powerful. So that's my AI of the week. And I know you use this in your Mia summer school. My daughter and my stepson were using it as well. So they loved it because, again, it means they can sort of move over that step.
Yeah, one of the magic ones this week was we were in the Entreprenuers class, and all the children were choosing they named their business idea, but I said, like, really, you don't have a business. Your excitement doesn't get triggered until you got your own logo. And so we used an AI logo maker for everyone, and they were getting quite excited when they could see their own logos come to life as well. So having the ability to create your own visuals is super powerful, and it just like gives you that ability to be unique and be customized.
Yeah, we'll drop a link in the description to that. But if you're listening to this, it's ClipDrop. It's Stability AI. Just Google it; it'll come up. So that's it for the week. So as ever, please do sign up for our AI Insider newsletter if you haven't already. We've got the AI assisted organization, blueprint, the white paper. So that's definitely worth read as well. We'll come back on the competition, the exact timing and the terms of that, and what the prize is going to be. So if you've enjoyed this, if this has been useful to you in any way, please do follow us on all the social media, all the usual social media. Share the podcast with somebody else. And especially if you've been interested in the things we were showing, have a look at us on YouTube and please subscribe. Could do a bit of a few more subscribers
reviews
there
as well, please. Apple Podcast if you can.
Yeah, some reviews would be good as well. Yeah, exactly. We need all the help we can get. Our job really is Implement AI is to help businesses of all sizes, implement AI. There's a clue in the name, and that's what we're here to do. So thanks again, once for listening or for watching. We'll see you again at the same time next week.
See ya.